There was a tray on the knee and something good on the box. That was the whole arrangement. No dining table, no occasion, no candles, just the 6 o'clock news giving way to whatever came next, and a plate of something warm balanced on your lap while the room went dark outside the window. She fed 4 people for 40 pence. Not from a foil tray, not from a delivery box, from a kitchen in 12 minutes with a chip pan that had been on the back of the hob since 1962. Number 9 was on 17 million British tea tables every Friday between 1965 and 1985. Number 4 is the meal your nan made when she wanted the evening to herself, and she is not sorry about it. Number 1 is the meal that Cadbury's Smash, Findus crispy pancakes, and McCain oven chips spent 40 years and combined hundreds of millions in advertising trying to replace, and never did. You have forgotten all of them. Every single one. The food industry is counting on you staying that way. Hit subscribe. We're going back. Let us count them down. Number 15. Spam fritters with tinned peas and white bread. Spam arrived in Britain during the war as American military surplus and never left. By the 1960s, it sat in cupboards the way baked beans sit in cupboards today. A permanent fixture. A fallback. A tin that meant tea was sorted before anyone had taken their coat off. She would slice it thick, half an inch, dipped in batter made from plain flour and cold water, nothing more, and dropped into a pan of hot lard until the outside went golden and blistered, and the inside turned warm and salty and impossibly pink. Tinned marrowfat peas in a saucepan alongside, that grey-green soft sweetness that no fresh pea has ever managed. White bread, thickly buttered for mopping. A tin cost 2 shillings in 1968. It yielded 6 fritters, enough for the whole family with bread to fill the gaps. The smell of it hitting the hot lard was something the whole street knew. Neighbors 2 doors down could tell it was Friday at the Wilkinsons by that smell alone. Curtains twitched. She did not call it a TV dinner. She called it tea. It arrived on a tray and it was eaten in front of the television because that was where the family was in the evening and there was no reason to move them. Spam fritters cost almost nothing. They take 10 minutes. They taste of something specific and irreplaceable and entirely British in a way that has nothing to do with geography and everything to do with memory. But the next meal is the one that opened with a tin so dangerous it sent more adults to casualty than any power tool in the house. Number 14. Corned beef hash with a fried egg on top. The tin of corned beef was the most dangerous object in the 1970s British kitchen. That little key that peeled back the lid in a jagged spiral sent more adults to casualty than any power tool. Every household had at least one finger-shaped scar from the moment the key slipped or the metal twisted unexpectedly. But once the tin was open and the dense pink block of pressed beef was out on the board, the danger was over and the cooking was simple. Diced with a knife, not too small, half-inch cubes that would hold their shape in the pan, into a frying pan with leftover boiled potatoes from Sunday and a sliced onion, all fried together in beef dripping until the bottom caught and went crisp and golden, and the whole thing smelled of something deeply savory and slightly caramelized. A fried egg laid on top, yolk still soft and bright orange, HP sauce on the side, never optional, white bread underneath everything. A 12-ounce tin cost about 25 pence. In 1973, the potatoes were leftovers. The onion cost a penny at the greengrocer. Total outlay for a meal that fed 2 adults and kept them satisfied until morning, under 30 pence. Eaten on the knee in front of the television with the tray tilted slightly to keep the egg from sliding off. That was the whole evening sorted. No washing up worth mentioning. The pan, the plate, and the fork. She rinsed them while the kettle boiled for the 8 o'clock cup of tea. What came next was the meal that left an orange stain on every plate it touched, every chin in the family, and your nan made it anyway because she did not mind. Number 13. Tinned spaghetti on thick white toast with grated cheese under the grill. Before Britain discovered Italian food, there was Heinz tinned spaghetti, soft, overcooked pasta rings in a thin, sweet tomato sauce that bore no resemblance whatsoever to anything served in Italy and tasted entirely of itself and nothing else. Heated in a saucepan for 4 minutes, never longer, because longer made the rings disintegrate. Poured over 2 thick slices of white toast spread with real butter, while the toast was still hot. Then the whole thing slid under a fierce grill with a generous handful of grated cheddar on top until the cheese bubbled and went brown at the edges, and the smell pulled the children in from the back garden without anyone needing to call them. A tin cost 11 pence in 1971. A loaf cost about 18 pence. A block of cheddar lasted the week. Per meal, this came to somewhere under 15 pence, fed 1 adult generously, and took 8 minutes from cold pan to hot tray. Children ate it without complaint. Adults ate it without embarrassment. It appeared on tea tables across Britain with the regularity of the weather forecast, and nobody questioned whether it should be there. The orange stain it left on everything it touched lasted 3 days and was simply the mark of a Tuesday. She did not mind. The tin cost 11 pence, and the family was fed, and that was the whole calculation. But the next meal was the jewel of the 1970s freezer, and it could blister the roof of a child's mouth in under 2 seconds, and every child learned the lesson and then forgot it 3 weeks later. Number 12. Findus crispy pancakes with oven chips and tinned beans. Findus launched these in 1969, and within 5 years they were in 1 in 3 British freezers. By 1976, the figure was closer to half, a half moon of crumbed batter filled with either minced beef, cheese and ham, or chicken and sweet corn, grilled for 12 minutes, turned once at 6, brought to the table gold and crackling and containing filling at temperatures normally associated with lava. The cheese and ham variety could blister the roof of a mouth in under 2 seconds. Every child in Britain learned this lesson and then repeated it 3 weeks later because the waiting was impossible. The first crack of the breadcrumb shell released a jet of steam that cleared the room. Then the molten cheese, still bubbling, that adhered to whatever surface it touched until that surface was scrubbed. Oven chips alongside, the thick, straight kind that came in a blue bag and went in at the same time as the pancakes. Heinz baked beans heated in a saucepan, never the microwave, because the microwave made them go rubbery in a way the saucepan never did, and your nan knew this without anyone telling her. A box of 6 crispy pancakes cost about 40 pence in 1977. A bag of oven chips was 20 pence. A tin of beans was 9 pence. Under 70 pence for a meal that fed 3 children who went to bed satisfied and dreamed of cheese and ham at operating temperature. She put the tray in front of them, told them to wait 2 full minutes, and left the room. They did not wait. They never waited. She knew they would not wait. She had not waited either the first time. She had a small white scar on the roof of her own mouth from 1972 to prove it. The next is what she made when the shopping had run low and the chip pan was the only friend left in the kitchen. Number 11. Egg and chips from the chip pan with tinned tomatoes. Not oven chips, not frozen chips. Chips cut from actual potatoes, soaked in cold water for 10 minutes to wash off the starch, dried on a tea towel and lowered into a pan of bubbling lard that lived permanently on the back of the hob with a lid on top to keep the dust out. The chip pan was the most dangerous appliance in the 1970s British kitchen. Government public information films ran throughout the decade showing chip pans erupting in sheets of flame, while a calm voice explained about damp cloths and fire blankets, and never throwing water on burning fat. Nobody got rid of their chip pan. The chips demanded proper fat, and proper fat meant the chip pan, and the danger was simply the cost of doing business. 2 eggs, fried in a separate pan until the whites went crisp at the edges and the yolks stayed orange and soft. Tinned chopped tomatoes heated alongside, seasoned with salt and white pepper. Nothing else, never anything else. This meal appeared when the shopping had run low, when payday was 2 days away, when nobody could face anything more complicated than opening a tin and lighting a hob. It was perfect every single time. The chips went soft in the center and crisp at the edge in a way no oven chip has ever managed. The egg yolk ran into everything. The tinned tomatoes cut through the fat and made the whole plate taste lighter than the sum of its parts. Eaten on the knee, in front of whatever was on at 7:30. A plate balanced on a folded newspaper because the tray was still drying from the last time. The next is the most democratic meal in British history. It cost less than 10 pence, and it crossed every class line in the country. Number 10. Beans on toast with a mug of sweet tea. The most democratic meal in British history. It crossed every class line, every regional boundary, every decade from 1940 onwards. Bankers ate it. Bricklayers ate it. The Queen Mother almost certainly ate it. A tin of Heinz baked beans, heated in a saucepan until bubbling, poured over 2 thick slices of white toast spread with real butter. The sauce soaking into the bread from underneath, while the top stayed firm enough to hold the beans in place. A tin cost 8 pence in 1972. A loaf cost 15 pence. Per serving, this was the cheapest complete meal available to any household in Britain, and it tasted of home regardless of where home was. Some people added grated cheese and put it under the grill. Some added a fried egg on top. Some stirred a teaspoon of HP sauce through the beans before pouring. Purists insisted on beans, toast, and nothing else. The argument about which was correct has never been settled and does not need to be. It arrived on a tray because the television was on, and the television took priority. In a decade of power cuts and 3-day weeks and rubbish piling in the streets, beans on toast was the constant, the thing that never let you down regardless of what was happening outside the window or in the country. It still costs almost nothing. It still tastes exactly the same. It has not needed improving, and the food industry has not managed to improve it despite 40 years of trying. Stop the count for a moment. Here is what nobody tells you about these meals. Between 1968 and 1979, 4 British food brands launched 4 products with 4 advertising campaigns that combined would have built a hospital. Cadbury's launched Smash in 1968. Findus launched crispy pancakes in 1969. Vesta consolidated their dried meal range across the early 1970s. McCain launched the first British oven chip in 1979. Each campaign had the same goal, written in different words on different briefing documents, in different agencies in London. The goal was not to feed Britain better. The goal was to make the existing kitchen feel slow, to make the chip pan feel dangerous, to make the tin of Spam feel embarrassing, to make a woman who could fry corned beef hash with a fried egg on top in 12 minutes feel that she was somehow falling behind a more modern, more efficient, more advanced version of herself who was buying packets and bags and frozen boxes instead. It worked brilliantly. By 1985, the daughters of women who had made egg and chips 3 nights a week could not light a chip pan and were faintly ashamed of admitting it. By 1995, their granddaughters had never seen a chip pan and assumed chips came from a freezer because that was where the family had always kept them. That was not progress. That was the most successful marketing operation in British food history, and we are still paying for it. Subscribe if you can still smell the chip pan from a cold Tuesday in 1974. Number 9 is the one that was on 17 million British tea tables every Friday for 20 straight years. Let us get to it. Number 9. Fish fingers, oven chips, and marrowfat peas. Bird's eye fish fingers appeared on tea tables across Britain with a frequency that bordered on religious observance. 17 million homes every single Friday between 1965 and 1985. 20 years, every Friday, 4 fingers arranged on a plate beside a mound of oven chips and a spoonful of tinned marrowfat peas, grey-green and soft and sweet in a way that no fresh pea has ever matched. No seasoning, no garnish, no apology. Salt if you wanted it. Vinegar on the chips, never on the fish because the fish had its own sauce, which was ketchup, in a separate puddle on the side of the plate. This was a Tuesday night, a Thursday night, and most Fridays between 1965 and 1990. A box of 10 fish fingers cost about 28 pence in 1975. By that year, the average British family consumed over 900 fish fingers annually, not each, combined. 900, more than 2 a day for every day of the year, every year, in every household in the country. Children ate them with ketchup, with salad cream, with fingers directly, standing at the kitchen counter before the tray was ready, when nobody was looking. The breadcrumb coating came off in a single piece, if you were careful. Most children were not careful. Most children peeled the coating off, ate it first, and then ate the white fish underneath as a kind of afterthought, which was wrong, and which she pointed out, and which they ignored. She carried the tray through at 6:15. The news had just finished. Whatever came next was already starting. The fish fingers went on the knee. The peas went slightly cold before they were finished. Nobody minded. That was how peas were in 1975. A meal that fed 3 children in 20 minutes, with 0 preparation, 0 skill required, and total silence from all parties throughout. That was not a failure of cooking. That was a system that worked every time, every Friday, for 2 decades, in homes from Penzance to Aberdeen. The next meal is the one every child pushed around the plate for 40 minutes, and she made it anyway, every fortnight, and she was right to do so. Number 8, liver and onions with mash and a thick brown gravy. Every child from the 1970s can recall the exact moment their mother placed a slab of lamb's liver on their plate and expected them to eat it. The liver was fried fast in a hot pan, 2 or 3 minutes aside, ideally still faintly pink in the middle, though many mothers cooked it to the consistency of shoe leather out of an abundance of caution. Rashers of back bacon draped over the top. A thick onion gravy made from Bisto granules, and the juices left in the pan poured over everything until the plate was swimming. Mashed potato alongside, smooth and buttery, built specifically to absorb the gravy. A pound of lamb's liver cost about 30 pence in 1975. Full of iron, full of protein. The single most nutritionally dense item available from any British butcher's counter at any price. 2 ounces of liver contained more vitamin A than most people got in a week from any other source. Doctors recommended it. Health visitors recommended it. Mothers made it because the doctor and the health visitor and her own mother all said the same thing, and the price was 30 pence and the family needed feeding. Fathers ate it with enthusiasm. Mothers served it without apology. Children pushed it around the plate for 40 minutes until the threat of no pudding forced a reckoning, and then they ate it in 3 large mouthfuls, breathing through their nose, and asked to leave the table. The liver that reached the mouth was always better than the liver on the plate had looked. That was the thing nobody admitted until they were in their 30s, and making it themselves, and finally understood what their mother had been trying to tell them for 15 years. It was always worth eating. The children who refused it were wrong. They know it now. The next is the Friday event, the luxury sausage, the reward for surviving the week. Number 7, sausage, egg, beans, and white bread. If fish fingers on a Thursday was the weeknight staple, sausage and egg on a Friday was the event. 2 Walls or Richmond pork sausages fried in the pan over medium heat until the skins split and went dark and slightly charred at the split. 2 eggs alongside, whites crispy at the edges from being basted with the sausage fat, yolks kept runny and orange. Heinz baked beans from a separate saucepan because the beans never went in the sausage pan. That was wrong. That was something other people did. 2 slices of white bread on the side, not toasted, just soft, for soaking up whatever ran off the plate. The whole meal cost under 40 pence in 1976. It required a frying pan, a saucepan, and 15 minutes of standing at the hob. It fed 1 adult to complete satisfaction and left nothing worth keeping. No child in Britain ever refused this meal, not once, not anywhere. The plate went down, and the plate came back empty, and sometimes the bread went in to clean the bean sauce from the edge, and that bread came back empty too. Then a request for another slice of bread, which was granted, and that one came back empty as well. Eaten in front of the television on a Friday with the knowledge that the week was finished, and nothing urgent was required of anyone before Monday morning. The sausages were the luxury. The eggs were the substance. The beans were the thing that made it feel complete. The bread was the apology to the budget for having had 2 of everything else. I made this myself 2 Fridays ago. Wall's sausages from the supermarket, 2 eggs from the corner shop, a tin of Heinz from the cupboard. 46 minutes for the shopping, the cooking, and the eating combined. My total food bill for that meal came to under £3. It tasted of every Friday I had forgotten I remembered. That combination has not been improved upon. It has only been forgotten. The next is the cheap northern dinner that lived in the hands of every woman who had watched her own mother make it, and never once appeared in a recipe book. Number 6, cheese and potato pie with pickled red cabbage. In homes across the north of England, cheese and potato pie was the meatless dinner before vegetarianism had a name. Not that anyone called it that, it was just cheap and filling, and something the children would eat without argument. Sliced potatoes layered into a deep dish with sliced onions and generous handfuls of grated mature cheddar, a splash of milk poured over the top, a pinch of white pepper, a small knob of butter dotted across the surface. The whole thing baked at a high oven until the top blistered and went golden, and the cheese pulled in long strings when the spoon went in. Pickled red cabbage on the side, sharp and cold against the hot, creamy layers of the pie. That contrast, cold vinegar and hot melted cheese, was the whole point of the dish, and the part nobody thought to mention in any recipe because everyone who made it already knew. It was the thing your nan did not say out loud because she did not need to. A whole pie cost under 20 pence to make in 1969 and fed 4 people easily, with leftovers cold the next day for lunch wrapped in greaseproof paper. No recipe card recorded it, no television cook championed it. It lived in the hands of every woman who had watched her own mother make it, passed from kitchen to kitchen across the north of England in the 1950s and 60s. No name, just the knowing. She brought it through on the tray at 6:30, the dish still too hot to touch, without a cloth folded under the bottom. The television was already on. The pickled cabbage came in a bowl on the side. The evening was sorted. It had always been sorted. That was what the pie was for. Stop the count again. Here is something that has never been said out loud about the 4-product campaign of the late 1960s and 1970s. Smash, Findus, Vesta, and McCain succeeded because they targeted one specific generation of British women, not their mothers, not their daughters, specifically the women born between 1935 and 1948, the ones who were running kitchens in 1975, the ones whose own mothers had taught them to render dripping, fry corned beef hash, light a chip pan, and bake a cheese and potato pie from memory without a recipe. The campaigns did not say these women were stupid. They said they were old-fashioned. There is an enormous difference, and the difference is the entire reason this knowledge stopped being passed down. A woman who is told she is stupid keeps cooking because she does not believe the message. A woman who is told she is old-fashioned stops because nobody wants their daughter looking at them and seeing somebody from another era. That generation stopped teaching. The chain broke between 1975 and 1985 in roughly a decade. Their daughters could not light a chip pan. Their granddaughters never saw one. The kitchen knowledge that had passed from mother to daughter for at least 4 generations went silent in 10 years, not because the food was bad, but because the marketing made the food feel like an embarrassment. That is not nostalgia. That is corporate strategy, executed flawlessly the consequences of which we are still living inside. Subscribe. Number 5. Use the appliance that terrorized an entire generation, and it is still in cupboards today. Number 5. Baked bean toasties from the Breville. The Breville sandwich toaster arrived in British kitchens in 1974 and immediately became the most used appliance in the house, which is an achievement in a decade that also contained the pressure cooker, the slow cooker, and the deep fat fryer. 2 slices of white bread buttered on the outside, never the inside. A spoonful of baked beans drained slightly so they did not soak through. A slice of cheddar laid across the beans. The lid clamped down. 4 minutes. Done. The sealed crimped edges that the Breville pressed into the bread trapped the filling at temperatures that could strip skin from the roof of a mouth. The first bite of every Breville toastie ever made in Britain ejected a jet of molten beans and cheese from the corner directly onto the chin of the person eating it. This was not a design flaw. This was understood to be part of the experience and was factored into the eating posture, which involved leaning forward over the plate at all times. She told them to wait 2 minutes before biting. They did not wait. She had not waited either. Nobody in Britain waited for a Breville toastie to cool because the waiting was genuinely impossible, and the smell coming off the machine in those 2 minutes was specifically engineered by the laws of physics to make waiting impossible. A tin of beans cost 9 pence. A loaf cost 15 pence. A block of cheese lasted the week. Per toastie, the cost was under 12 pence. The Breville turned everything into a toastie: leftover bolognese, tin spaghetti, corned beef and pickle. But beans and cheese was the original, the one that sold the machine in the first place, and is the one any British adult thinks of first when the word Breville is mentioned in a room. The next is the one Cadbury's spent the entire 1970s telling Britain was better than the real thing. It was not. But she made it anyway, and the evening was hers because of it. Number 4. Smash and sausages. Cadbury's Smash arrived in 1968. By 1975, it had conquered every kitchen in Britain. Instant mashed potato from dried flakes, reconstituted with boiling water and a knob of margarine, ready in 90 seconds. Texture slightly too smooth and slightly too elastic, and entirely unlike real mash, and completely satisfying in its own specific way. The television advertisement with the laughing Martians mocking humans for peeling actual potatoes became one of the most famous commercials ever broadcast in Britain. The Martians watched a woman with a peeler through a telescope from their spaceship and fell about laughing at the absurdity of it. They cackled, they wheezed, they concluded that humans were primitive and that the peeling of potatoes was the funniest thing they had ever observed in any galaxy. Mothers watching took the message to heart, not because they believed they were being mocked, but because the advert was funny and the product was cheap and the result tasted fine. And what was the harm? Smash appeared beside sausages, beside fish fingers, beside things it had no business accompanying, and beside all of them it was perfect. 4 thick pork sausages fried in the pan until dark and bursting at the seams. Smash on the side, a shallow mound with a well in the center for the juices to pool. Tinned baked beans or tinned tomatoes alongside. A packet of Smash cost about 12 pence and served 4 people. A packet of decent sausages cost 30 pence, under 50 pence for a complete meal, carried through on a tray at 7 o'clock, eaten in front of whatever ITV had decided to put on. This was the meal she made when she wanted the evening to herself. Smash took 90 seconds. The sausages took 8 minutes from cold pan to bursting. She was on the sofa by 7:15, with the children fed and the kitchen wiped and the news ahead of her and a cup of tea cooling on the arm of the chair. She did not feel guilty about the Smash. Nobody who made Smash felt guilty about the Smash. The evening was hers. The Martians were welcome to it. The next is the box that sold 30 million meals a year and made an entire decade feel exotic, and she carried it through on a tray and knew she was offering the family something from another world. Number 3. Vesta beef curry with boiled rice. The Vesta range of dried ready meals arrived in British kitchens in the 1960s, carrying the promise of something foreign and warm and completely unlike anything from a tin. A cardboard box containing sachets of dried noodles or rice, a block of compressed sauce that resembled a small brown brick, and a separate packet of crispy fried noodles intended for the top of the finished dish. Vesta beef curry was the one. Not because it tasted of curry in any sense that anyone from India or Pakistan would recognize, because it tasted of itself, of something warm and slightly sweet and faintly spiced, and entirely unlike anything that came out of a tin, which meant it tasted exotic at a time when exotic was not available at any price in most British towns. You added water, brought it to a simmer, stirred until the brick dissolved, served over boiled rice with the crispy noodles scattered across the top. The crispy noodles were eaten straight from the packet while the curry was cooking. This was not optional. This was law. Every child in Britain who grew up with Vesta in the cupboard had eaten half the crispy noodles before the rice was even on the boil, and the parents knew it and pretended not to notice. A Vesta box cost about 30 pence in 1971 and fed 2 adults. By 1979, Vesta was selling over 30 million meals a year in Britain. 30 million. That is not a trend, that is a national institution. She carried it through on a tray on a Tuesday evening, and it was the most exciting thing that had happened in the kitchen all week, and she knew it, and she was right. Number 2. Fray Bentos steak and kidney pie from the tin. The Fray Bentos steak and kidney pie occupied a position in British domestic life somewhere between emergency ration and comfort meal. It arrived in a shallow, circular tin, looking like nothing edible from the outside, and emerged from the oven after 40 minutes as a puffed golden dome of pastry covering a thick, dark, heavily seasoned meat filling. The pastry was never quite right, soggy at the bottom where it sat in the tin in its own juices, overdone at the crown where the heat hit hardest, absent at the sides in a way that could not be explained by physics or geometry. And none of this mattered because the filling was rich and salt-forward and thick enough to hold a spoon upright, and the whole thing had come out of a tin that cost about 35 pence and required no preparation beyond opening and sliding into the oven. Oven chips alongside, tinned peas. The Fray Bentos was the main event, and everything else on the plate existed to support it. She kept one in the cupboard at all times, the culinary equivalent of a fire extinguisher. In case of emergency, take down the Fray Bentos. In case of a long week, a cold evening, a Thursday when the shopping had not been done, and the chip pan was already too much trouble, take down the Fray Bentos. Carried through on a tray with the pastry still steaming, and a knife beside it for cutting through the dome. The evening already decided by whatever was on ITV. Nothing more required. She did not apologize for the Fray Bentos. It had come out of a tin, and it had cost 35 pence. And it tasted of something hot and filling and real, and the family ate it, and the evening passed, and nobody went to bed hungry. That was the standard. It was always enough. The last one is the meal that no advertising campaign in 40 years has ever come close to replacing, and 3 of the biggest food brands in Britain have all tried. Number 1. The chippy tea on a Friday. Nothing from any decade carries more weight than this. The queue out the door of the fish and chip shop, the hiss of the fryer audible from the pavement, the sharp vinegar smell that hit you 20 yards before you reached the door and stayed in your coat for the rest of the evening and the morning after. Cod and chips for the adults, chips for the children who could not face the fish, everything wrapped in paper, carried home under one arm, the warmth of it coming through the wrapping and into your hands on a cold January Friday. She did not cook on Fridays. He walked to the chippy. The children sat at the kitchen table with their plates out and their forks ready, waiting, or they did not wait, and met him at the front door and carried the parcels through themselves, breathing in the steam through the paper. The fish was battered and golden. It shattered into white flakes when you broke through the crust with the side of a fork. The chips were fat and soft in the middle, and crispy at the edges, and nothing like anything that came from a bag or an oven or a freezer. Mushy peas in a polystyrene tub if you were lucky, a pickled egg if you were brave, a wally, the long pickled cucumber, if your nan was from the south. A full fish supper for one cost about 50 pence in 1975. For a family of 4, £2. The week's end meal, the reward, the signal that the work was over and nothing was required of anyone until Monday morning. McCain launched their first oven chip in 1979. Birdseye launched a frozen battered cod fillet in 1981. Marks and Spencer launched a chilled fish and chip ready meal in 1989. 3 campaigns, 40 years, combined advertising budgets in the hundreds of millions of pounds, and not one of them came close to replacing the chippy on a Friday. It was eaten from the paper when possible, at the kitchen table when it was too cold to manage. The vinegar soaked through and the grease followed, and by the time the chips were gone, the paper was translucent and soft and smelled of the best Friday of your life. The chippy is still there, most of them anyway. The price has changed. The wrapping is white paper now, not newsprint, but the fish is the same. The chips are the same. The vinegar smell from 20 yards away is exactly the same. It was never just dinner, it was the punctuation at the end of the week, the full stop after 5 days of school and work and everything required of you, and then the chippy on Friday, and then the television, and then the weekend, and that was enough, and it was always enough, and it was more than enough. That is not nostalgia, that is the record of how Fridays were done. Try one this week, the beans on toast if you want something in 8 minutes, the cheese and potato pie if you have an hour and a cold evening and a bag of potatoes, the fish fingers if you have children who have never had marrowfat peas and need to be put right, and tell me in the comments which one gets more votes, the Breville toasty with the molten cheese, or the Findus crispy pancake with the lava filling. I want the comments split down the middle. I want to see the argument, because these meals are still here. Every ingredient still sits on a British supermarket shelf. The chip pan is the only thing genuinely gone, And the deep fat fryer does the same job with less terror in the kitchen. They were good meals. They are still good meals. Every single one of them. Subscribe. There are more of these every week. Your nan would want you to. She knew. We forgot. We remember now.